All right, today we're going to be taking a look at our sewing machine parts, and this is for the Bernina 325 machine, which is what is in our classroom. And I want to start first with something on top called the tension control or the tension dial. That is this device right here, and as you can see, it goes from 0 all the way up to number 10. But as I was scrolling by, you might have noticed that there was this red line. And that's what we want to line up with that dot right there. So we want to line that up because this is what controls the thread being tight or loose, but typically this is the setting we're going to want. So if we noticed our thread was bunching or breaking, we could try to adjust this button. So this is called the tension dial. Going on to our machine up here, we have this bobbin. This is a thread guide really, but it's for our bobbins as we wind those. So we catch this as we wind our bobbin. Continuing over here, this is the remainder portion of our bobbin winding. And what we do is we put our bobbin right here and we move this thing over and it will wind our bobbin for us. So this is a bobbin winder stop right here. Moving on to the side here, we have our spool pins. We have this one right here, and how it works is you want this nice little pad laid up right up next to the machine, and then you take this portion, and the flat part of this is going to push against our spool. So we would have our spool of thread in between here. So this is our spool pin. We have an additional one that actually pops up from back behind, just like that, but we typically don't use that one in here. Be gentle with it because it's not super sturdy. Moving on to our machine, we have a couple other things that I do want to point out. They're called thread guides, and usually where you see like arrows and things like that, that's indicating thread guides. We're going to talk more about thread guides when we actually go to thread our machine, but for now I just wanted to kind of point it out. One thing that I would like to take a time to point out here is called the thread take-up lever. And as I'm moving it here, you can probably see that moving right there. And a lot of times students say, oh no, it's broke, it's gone. It's not gone, it's just that you have to use your hand wheel, which we'll show in a minute, to get that up to the top. So that's the thread take-up lever right there, that device. Over here to the side, what we were just using is the hand wheel. And when we move our hand wheel, a couple things happen. So you can see, if you're going down here, you can see our needle move. You can also see that thread take-up lever move. And so it controls quite a bit. On the front of our machine, it's really cool. We've got this nice little diagram. I'm gonna go ahead and turn on our machine, which, by the way, our switch is right over here to the side. And when I turn that on, it takes a minute for my machine to kind of come on, and it will move the needle, so beware. Usually that needle resets, so just be careful, don't put your hands by it. Another couple things here that I wanted to point out on the front of the machine is this is our start and stop button. And this machine is really cool because it's got this cool feature that we don't even have to use the foot pedal. So if I hit this, you'll see my machine actually starts to sew. And how I control how fast or how slow that is with this dial. So right now it's set the slowest speed it can go. As I move that up, you can see it can go quite fast. There's a little bit of thread still left in this machine. You can see that moving. So I'm going to slow that down. And when I want to stop it, I just hit this. Okay. Another button that you see, I'll have to fish that thread out later. Another button you can see down here is this weird, like it looks like a hook and it's turning around. This is the backstitch button. So as I'm sewing, I'm going to put a little piece of paper underneath my machine here for a second. And I'm going to lower the presser foot, which is that weird thing that looks like a set of skis here. I'm going to lower that. And how I raise and lower that is there's a cool lever right behind the machine there. You see it? That you simply raise and lower to get that up or down. You always want it down when you're sewing. And so what's going to happen is I'm going to go ahead and hit that button. I'm going to make sure it's going slow. And watch how it's going forward, right? You see it going forward? But when I hit that backstitch button, and if I hold it, you'll notice that it's going backwards. So we always want to backstitch when we start and stop our stitching. So if we start a seam, we always want to backstitch a few stitches. If we end a seam, we always want to backstitch a few stitches as well. So always make sure you do that. Again, to stop it, I hit the button. And if my needle is down in there, which right now, it's wanting to kind of be blurry there, but it is not down in the paper. If it was though, I can come over here, okay, and I can use this button right here to change how my needle is. Right now you can see it's always set to come in the up position. So my needle's always going to end in the up position, but I can change that by simply clicking that button. Okay, so now when I sew, we're going to try it again. It's being stubborn. There it goes. Now when I sew, I'll sew a little bit here. Don't forget to be back stitching at the beginning and the end. But we're going to go ahead and stop. And now you'll notice that the needle is in the down position. And that's simply because I changed this button right here. Okay? So pretty cool. What's happening here on the side is it is showing me that this is my length of stitch, how long my stitch is. And I can control that with these buttons right here. So if I push these buttons, you can see it goes higher. And what that means is as I'm sewing, let me see, I don't know if you can see it on here. I'm gonna use my hand to get that needle out. As I'm sewing, you can see those dots, right? Those dots are gonna get further apart if I push this button right here. As you can see here on the picture, right? It's smaller and it gets larger. So I can make it smaller or larger. Right now I've got it set pretty high. I can go all the way up to 5 if I want, or I can go all the way down to 0. Typically the machine will start it and you kind of see where it's blinking. That's saying where it should typically be. Okay, so it's right about there. Now, another cool thing is, like, say I wanted to do a zigzag or something like that, then I controlled this button right here. You can see here that the zigzag starts out small, it gets wider. How we control that is with this button right here. And it's the same thing. We're making it go like this, and so it's changing that dial. Okay, so all you gotta do is do that. We want it back down to 0 because we want a straight line. We don't want a zigzag or anything like that. And then finally, this last button over here, if you're wondering what the heck is that middle button, it's called needle positioning. And so you can see that there, it looks like a needle, right? That looks like a needle right there. And you're gonna take that, okay, and if you, let me lower my presser foot down, my presser foot here. And I'm gonna try to get up to the side here so you can see my needle a little bit better. But if I push that button, you see that moving, right? That needle's moving. And I'm simply just pushing this button, okay? So I am pushing that button and it's changing it. Now automatically when it starts, it will center it unless you have selected a special stitch. Over here now you've got all these really cool buttons. You can see here that these are telling you some different stitches that you can do. Right now they won't show up really well because I am going to not be sewing with thread. So since I'm not sewing with thread, I don't have thread in my machine, you really won't see it very well. What you'll see is that your dots don't just go in a straight line. You might see 2 rows of dots. In that case, it is doing a zigzag. You just can't really see it because there's no thread connecting it. But if it had thread in it, you would be able to tell. And what happens is when I select a number, let's say for example, I select 5, you can see it changes on my screen. And 5 is a really cool stitch. It's actually my favorite because it's called a boomerang stitch. And what that means is I'm gonna set it up here, and I'm lowering that with my lever in the back. And since I've got it set at 5, what it's gonna do is it's gonna sew forward a little bit, but watch, it goes back. Did you notice how it went back a little bit? So it goes back, it's back stitching basically. So it says, oh, you're starting out and you need to do a back stitch. And so it automatically does your back stitch for you for the right amount of time. If you're just controlling the back stitch by yourself, I would say go ahead and back stitch about 4 or 5 stitches. I usually count them out. But since I have this machine and I can use the 5, I don't even need to do that. Okay, it's gonna go all the way to the end. Now, when it's on this boomerang stitch, what I do is as I get close to the end, I do hit the back stitch button 1 time, but do you notice it goes back more than 1 stitch, and then it will come forward and it will stop, and it stopped in the down position, so it's ready. So that's a pretty cool stitch there that you can use, is that number 5. I like to use it a lot. I think it's pretty cool. But there's lots of other ones. Matter of fact, you can even go up here and change it to letters. And you can actually scroll through and do different letters. So it's pretty darn cool. And yes, you can actually save it. That's a little bit more complicated. You could save it and it could actually spell out your name. Now, granted, they are super, super tiny and small. So a couple other things I wanted to point out in our video here too, is that over here to the side, we have the, controls our foot pedal. This is connected to our foot pedal, which if we scroll down, way down there on the ground, turned around, that's our foot pedal. See if I can get it turned around. There we go. And so that controls the foot pedal. Remember that we can unplug this for safety. And now if I accidentally step down on my foot pedal, you don't hear anything happening with the machine because it is not plugged in. But if the minute I plug that back in, now it's sewing, and I could step down and get hurt. So please make sure that if you need the light on to thread your machine, that you unplug that. Okay. So that's most of the machine parts, but we got a few more down here at the bottom I wanted to point out. So again, I'm going to make sure that my needle's up. If it's not, I'm going to take it up myself. And you've got a few more pieces down here. Right down here, you've got these weird looking teeth. These are called feed dogs. So you got the feed dog way down there. Do you see those? And when I sew, I'll turn on my little automatic sewer here. And you'll notice that the teeth are moving. And that's what moves our fabric or our paper through automatically. And we don't have to worry about it. And you might see my needle position changing. It's because it thinks it's making a G. So I haven't changed that back. But you also have down here, what they call the throat plate. And the throat plate's really cool. You can actually look here real close and see that there's etchings on there, right? And that's telling you how far the distance is. Typically what we want to sew, it's like a 5/8 inch distance. And that is marked on my machine over here. I actually kind of help you cheat a little bit. So it's a little easier to know. And that's marked with the red tape right here. The blue tape is marking what we call the 1/4 inch. And then you also have this plate. It's an extended plate. You can push the button and simply slide off the plate. Make sure that your needle is up. My needle is not up, so I'm going to move it up. And then you slide off the plate and it comes off. Then down here, you've got a little door that opens up, okay, that you can put your bobbin in. They call that the bobbin cover. Okay, but that goes all down in here. Somebody left some thread in here. But this is where your bobbin actually will go inside of, along with your bobbin case. And then when you're done using that, or you're ready to put this back on, it's really easy. Just literally slide it on. I'm doing it with one hand. And you slide it on just like that. So now you know a little bit more about your machine. Make sure that you always check at the end to make sure that these pieces are here, that your presser foot is here and attached. If it falls off, it's a really simple fix. They are hooked on by a latch here. You just see how it falls off. Sometimes it falls off like that. Don't take it off purposely, but if it falls off, just slide it back on and then slide that lever, and now you've got it back on and attached. So make sure that that's on, your presser foot's on. This is up here, that you don't have pins or needles or thread or paper or anything here. And then don't forget, finally at the end, you're gonna go over here to the side and you're gonna turn it off, okay? And that's a little bit about your machine.